Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is the moment when we talk to reporters and editors and journalists and all different people who are writing about the borough of the Bronx and issues about the Bronx so that we can find out what's like kind of behind the scenes. And also in our second segments, we usually do artists, and we have a wonderful art concept really to present. It's actually 10 years old, and this is the 10th anniversary of it, and we're going to spend a little time with it. But we're going to start with the associate editor at The City. It is Rachel Holiday Smith. Nice to have you back on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
You wrote, and you told me just before, it's part of Guides and Explainers, which I guess is a journalism concept
Yeah,
in for The City. You wrote the Guide to Legal Cannabis in New York City. And let's just start with what the plans were and how you see those plans playing out. And then we'll break down some of the items that you wrote about.
sure. So I part of the reason I did this story is because a lot of people I talked to just in my life and New Yorkers I know were a bit confused about what's going on with legal cannabis right now because as you'll probably recall in 2021, which feels like a million years ago now,
That's
that's when we actually, as a state, legalized the possession of marijuana. Cuomo signed that law, one of the last things he did in office. But it's taken until now to really even see any of the kind of real meat behind that law, meaning legalized dispensaries and sort of the first round of licensing for the people who are actually going to make the structure or the system of legal cannabis in New York State. So, um, you know, we at the city.nyc we're trying to just have people know a little bit about what's going on because while some things are legalized and there are some stores that are opening up, a lot of parts of this system that's supposed to be rolled out are
yeah.
still kind of murky or not
Well,
there.
one of the things which actually has not been written about, I don't think you had it in your piece either, is because it really involves upstate, is that growers who were promised certain considerations are ready to go, and now they have product they can't legally get rid of, and then that potentially feeds the black market, and that creates more problems. And it's that's one of a few different issues, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the thing that is different about New York State is that the stuff you buy in the legal dispensaries, all of that product has to be created in New York State as well.
Right.
So, it's this whole pipeline that's regulated. And if you don't have stores to sell in, yeah, those farmers don't have any place to actually get their product out there. So, yeah, they're having a hard
Right.
time.
That
So,
is, yeah, and it backs up the kind of the whole system. What about the notion of we talked about on Bronx Talk last week? Um, what about the notion of the whole idea was to support the people who had been affected through the criminalization process in the past, and my sense is that those people are still working to get a dispensary open. Many do have the license, but the complications of opening a store are difficult.
yes. So, as you said, yeah, this was designed to give people who had past convictions that were related to marijuana and cannabis a leg up in the dispensary business. So, yeah, a lot of them have those licenses, but they actually haven't opened their doors because it's been really hard to find real estate. It's been hard to get capital to actually open the stores. There's been a lot of hurdles that we've written about many
Yeah,
times. And yeah, and also there aren't as many licenses that have been given out by the state as the state would have wanted. So it's the whole thing is a bit backed up.
one of the experts we spoke to last week talked about funding, that if there was more simple funding to fund the program to help some of these people who may not have the capital to open a store, plus all the other technical things, that if they would provide more of those supports, money being numero uno, and the second one being providing technical support, that maybe they could move this system faster. Do you have that sense that that's a missing piece?
Yeah, and it's also a slow piece. So the state has promised, and I hope I get this right, at least $150 million to go towards those social equity programs, exactly what you're describing.
Right.
And they only announced that funding they had gotten that funding a few weeks ago. So if you think about the timeline from 2021 till now, that's at least 2 years, that they did not have that funding to help those folks. And then, sort of on the private side, we've seen a lot of big money players in the cannabis field partnering up with people who have passed convictions to get a license, and then they fund that person. But that comes with complications too. These are big business people working with someone who maybe has never owned a business before or who has little experience. And
So
we've
then who
reported on
really
some.
controls the business and who really benefits? I mean, I'm just being realistic and having
Right,
sat
it
in the
just it
seat
just
for a
brings
while.
questions and some
You,
worries
you,
about that.
you know what's interesting is the a gentleman who runs Status. He was the general manager of Status, which is the first one that opened in the Bronx, just west of Southern Boulevard on East Tremont. That is exactly what that situation is. He partners with. He was on our program Bronx Talk, and he partners with somebody who received the license, and he's worked in California and Arizona and has been in this business for a long time. And so now, certainly, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the business they've opened, but that's the business structure that seems to be getting them.
And on the other side of the coin, that actually I'm sure that some people who can get the license through the social equity program are very happy to have that business acumen
That's
on that.
right. That's
Yeah,
right. It's not a given evil. Certainly, I wouldn't
no.
even suggest it. One of the questions that came up on our show and was asked in your article: are we ever going to see cannabis bars in New York the way we have bars serving alcohol? After you answer, I'll tell you what they answered, and what are your thoughts? Is it going to literally be like, oh wow, we can go in instead of hanging out and having a drink, you can make a purchase and do your thing?
Yeah, the answer is almost certainly yes, we will have these, but what they look like and the specific rules around them is very much up in the air. I will say that New York City um, didn't opt out, meaning they are opt in to have this type of business, but the rules and regulations haven't been created. But it's going to be tricky because it's like, oh, how are you going to deal with people driving away from these establishments?
Right.
New
Well,
York
but
City,
not dissimilar to bars. I mean,
yes.
that's got. But here's something that I literally just thought of. So, okay, you have people sitting around smoking pot. Looks like it, the old Academy of Music on 14th Street when I was a youngster, and everybody's just sitting around, and that's what they're doing. But then they're going to need what food are you going to serve? You're going to make it a bar also. That complicates it. One thing that they brought up, which I thought was interesting, is that because of the various requirements for cannabis, there will always be significant security, official security, as
Mm,
opposed to a bar that just says, "Well, we'll hire a guy to be the bouncer." I
yeah.
thought that was kind of an interesting concept to move it forward. Now, what about the state? Now, what are they supposed to get? 13% of the tax on
Mhm.
everything sold. I really don't have a sense. Is the state making money yet, or we're way too far from that moment?
Yeah, they are making some money, but not very much, and that's another piece of the social equity part of this is that it was sort of giving licenses to people with past convictions, but also getting a lot of money coming in, a lot of revenue, and then spending that on things that would ostensibly help communities that have been harmed by the criminalization of cannabis. So far, that hasn't really happened because not enough businesses have opened to make
Yeah,
the money to build the revenue.
so it's
Um,
it's really just slow, and it's funny you say 2021. Who can remember back there? But so far in 2 years, we haven't gotten a lot, or where certainly that'll have an impact on a lot of different things. Now, what about the illegal shops? We did a full show on that a couple of months ago. It seems to me you can't launch this new industry unless you shut those down. And the mayor estimated there was 1,500 of them. Um, now apparently the state legislature before they left gave a little more teeth to the criminalization of it. But I know a shop that was closed down in my neighborhood, and 2 days later, it wasn't closed down anymore.
Yeah, that's been a huge problem for the people who have the legal licenses. They're really complaining about this. And
Hmm.
everyone's seen them in every neighborhood. They're in my neighborhood too. It's just these not even quasi, they are illegal shops. And one of the big reasons they're doing this is because there wasn't enforcement for a long time.
That's right.
You know, Governor Hochul made a big show a couple of weeks ago about, enforcing this rule that they shouldn't be open and sort of cracking down on a few shops, but that was a tiny fraction of the number. I talked to experts who are in the cannabis field, and they think that eventually, these will go away because the legal market will win out because it'll be better products and people will be more familiar with the
And
brands.
and also more trustworthy.
Yeah, but for now, it's sort of a wild west. But I should say for your viewers who are curious, there are some official labels or stickers that you can look
Yes.
for on the stores and then on the product as well that'll show you that it's regulated cannabis. And yeah.
And well, I was going to say, and you check the story on the city, and you can see what those are in case you're not sure of what they are. I think that the process of closing them down, while it's easy to say, well, go ahead and just close them down. If somebody has a smoke shop and they say, we don't sell cannabis, we don't sell marijuana, the only way to get there is either to do really a basic drugs thing. That's the way I see it. I'm not a cop or a detective, but it seems to me you need somebody to go in there and actually make a purchase, and then you got to go back in and bust them. And that's the I mean that's the way we've done drug busts all along. It seems like an arduous task, and you'd need a pretty large police force to handle that.
Yeah,
Am
that
I
would be
wrong
a
about
lot.
that?
No, you're correct, I think broadly, and then, it's also the politics of that. Keep in mind that this whole law to legalize was to avoid the criminalization and enforcement of
Right.
cannabis. So, for politicians to
Right,
tell the police
right,
force,
right.
"Hey, go in and bust those folks,"
Bust
it's
them up.
totally against what the
What
law
they
was
supposed.
intended. So, it's
Yeah,
just it's hard. I understand why it's hard for politicians to say, "Okay, let's crack down on these illegal shops." I do.
yeah. So just to wrap up, what has to happen next to move the thing forward in a proper legal manner?
Yeah, it's sort of boring, but the Office of Cannabis Management, the state, regulators have to create a lot more rules to create, new ways to have cannabis delivery, to have those sort of cannabis bars that we talked about, and to create the methods to actually get that product, which is grown in many upstate farms, down to the places where it's
So
actually
that,
going to be
yeah.
sold.
Listen, we have to shout out to your colleague Gabriel Poblete, who
Yes.
is a Report for America reporter for the city and did a lot of work on this story in this project as well.
Yeah, he's been covering the cannabis rollout of recreational, for months and months. So
Right.
he's been
So,
doing great
so
work.
you relied on him a lot, and he's been on our show. Maybe we'll invite him back at some point too. Listen, Rachel Holiday Smith, associate editor at the City. You're the best. We'll have you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to get into the Bronx Artist Documentary Project, which is now 10 years old, one of the most innovative projects in Bronx arts. And we'll do that right after this.